Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Former President Trump and Vice President Harris are up against the clock at this point. Just about 2 weeks left to go to convince voters they are the right candidate to lead the country for the next 4 years. Joining me now from New York is WFSB senior national correspondent Peter Zampa. Peter, thank you so much for being with us. One of your questions made some news, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But first, just generally, we know early voting has already started in some places. In Connecticut, it starts tomorrow. We're in the final stretch here. What are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, the massive numbers that are rolling in, Eric. I mean, you look at a state like Georgia. That's not just any state. That is a crucial state. It was in 2020, and it is again in 2024, considered one that could tip the balance one way or another. Early voting began there last week, and the numbers are just gigantic, smashing records not just on day one, but on day two as well, really getting a lot of people out to vote. Now, what that says about which party might be benefiting from that, unclear as of right now. We don't yet have all of that data, but it is clear that this is an energized electorate right now. Whichever issue you look at, whichever candidate you look at, people are paying attention, and that's a big deal. It's a good thing, but it just shows that so many people are ready to vote this year.
Yeah, for sure. People are keeping an eye on that calendar, and energized is certainly a good word. I mentioned in the beginning that one of your questions made some news, and I want to play that and then have you react to it. This was Wednesday. You had a chance to interact with J.D. Vance. Let's take a look at that.
What message do you think it sends to independent voters when you do not directly answer the question, did Donald Trump lose in 2020?
First of all, on the election of 2020, I've answered this question directly a million times. No. I think there are serious problems in 2020. So did Donald Trump lose the election? Not by the words that I would use.
So we saw that quote there, that question getting a lot of attention. Take us through that moment. Obviously, always what a journalist wants is to be asking the important questions. What did you make of that response?
Well, Eric, what that clip does not reflect is the amount of booing that came after my question. That Vance Trump-friendly crowd did not want to talk about 2020. What do I make of that response? The reason I asked the question in that way, Eric, is because he says he's answered this question a million times. Well, I don't know to who, because we've heard in recent days, whether it be the vice presidential debate or in interviews he's done since, we've heard J.D. Vance avoid this question, start talking about tech censorship rather than saying, no, he does not believe Donald Trump lost in 2020. So while he didn't actually answer the question I asked, which is, what does this dodging, avoiding this question directly, what impact does it have on independent voters who might feel one way or another about him not answering this question? He didn't actually answer that, but he answered the question everyone wanted to hear, which was, no, he does not believe Donald Trump lost in 2020. So that's a big moment because, no, we had not heard that, at least not in this setting, in a press conference. So it's a big deal. It shows you where J.D. Vance's head is at. It shows you that he is, of course, beholden to Donald Trump. He's his running mate. You really can't say anything else. But in this moment, he did not necessarily deflect like he has in past interviews. So, yeah, it was important not just for us in the press to hear, but for the entire American electorate.
And certainly interesting, as you said, that the booing, the people there didn't want you to ask the question, didn't want to hear the answer to the question. But like you said, we finally did hear it, and we don't know the effect it'll have. But now it's out there, as you said. So great stuff there, and we are glad to have you on to talk about it. Just one more on the presidential election. As we enter these final 2 weeks, what should we expect from the candidates? Where will they be focusing their attention? What do you expect to make headlines from them as we kind of bring this thing in for a landing?
Well, look, Eric, I would be surprised if they do any more adversarial interviews. We've seen them both tangle with not necessarily friendly journalists throughout the last few days, few weeks, and it hasn't necessarily hurt them all that much. In some cases, it has helped them, but in these next few weeks, I don't think you should expect Kamala Harris to sit down with Fox News or OAN or Newsmax again. And I don't think you should expect Donald Trump to really go on NBC or MSNBC, those more Democratic-leaning news organizations. But I think you can expect them to barnstorm all of these crucial states. You know, we're talking about that blue wall that Democrats really want to keep a hold on. We're talking about Georgia, which we mentioned earlier, Arizona, Nevada. These are the states. I'm sorry, I know we're up there in Connecticut. You should not expect to see either presidential hopeful face in your state, because a lot of people think that's a foregone conclusion. But Donald Trump has interestingly making an appearance here in New York City. Now, it's not like this city is up for grabs in this election, but it could be more of an ego thing that he wants to rent out MSG, Madison Square Garden, see how many people he can get inside there in this very blue city. It's an important thing for Donald Trump to do. But besides that, I don't think you should expect any outlier appearances. They need to stay focused on their strategy, which is all of these crucial battleground states.
Yeah, well, of course, except for the one thing when they come to Fairfield County, as I believe Tim Walz is doing this weekend to raise some money, they do like to come to Connecticut for that, Peter. I do want to talk to you a little bit about Congress, however.
That is true.
I do want to talk to you about Congress. Democrats have the majority in the Senate, Republicans in the House. What are we watching for there? Could there be some big shifts in that landscape as well on Election Day?
Yeah, this is what a lot of people should be looking at, because you might have a complete flip as far as the halls of Congress go. Right now, Democrats holding on to that slim one-seat majority, really. It's almost certain that Republicans will take control of the Senate, mainly because, Eric, this map for Democrats is just too difficult to defend. In just about every single swing state, they're defending a seat. That's difficult enough. And Democrats, if you believe the polling, are actually doing quite well in all of those races. But when you add in the fact that they're losing a Democratic incumbent in West Virginia, Joe Manchin, not running for re-election, that state goes so heavily for Donald Trump, it would be such a shocker if Democrats are able to keep that seat. And then you go to a state like Montana, Senator John Tester, the Democratic incumbent, he's been there for a while, holding on by a thread right now, but the picture continues to look better and better for the Republican challenger. Democrats are trying to fight back in certain states like Texas and Florida, but again, those are both popular incumbent Republicans. It's only single digits in the polling right now, but definitely leaning toward Republicans. So in the Senate, it really does look like it will be a Republican majority. It's just the margins that we'll look at, because that's when you get into questions about the balance of power and how difficult it is to pass legislation, especially with the filibuster. But that's a whole nother issue. In the House, it looks like a coin flip right now. In states where I am, where you are, some of those key races are really going to decide a lot, because, again, fine margins in the Senate. Some might argue even finer margins in the U.S. House right now. Republicans have been struggling with their power there because of how few votes they can lose on any given issue. So that one could easily flip into Democratic hands, dependent on some of these bigger state races.
All right, Peter Zampa, our senior national correspondent. We appreciate you sharing your insight and joining us this morning. Thanks very much. We'll see you again soon.